Good day, everybody. Welcome back to part 4 of this Regional Rails series. When we left it at the end of part 3, things were looking pretty good. We had a working fetch out to our API. We had put in our styling. When we changed the station, we would get different results. The departure and the station and the direction could all be changed through the settings. And all of that was working. The only thing we really lacked was anything to trigger a refresh other than changing the station. And you have to imagine if this was a real app that somebody would be standing at one station and expecting the trains to refresh, not to be skipping around curious about different stations. So we need to take care of that today. We're gonna rig this up with the ability to pull to refresh. We are also going to set it so that it automatically refreshes every 60 seconds and works like a real departure board would, where trains are rolling off the board as they come and go through the station. And then lastly, we have a limited set of stations here that we just hard-coded. There is a CSV file on the SEPTA API website that we are going to link to that will give us all the stations, and then we'll load them up here in the options. So that's our objective for today. I'd like to start with the refresh part. It's not that difficult. In our SEPTA block, we are loading up the trains with our change trains here on the listen option. What I'd like to do is actually move that out to a function. And so let's create a function called refresh departures. It's going to be a future, and it won't return anything. So it's a future void. We want to refresh departures is what we'll call it. It'll be async. And we just want to move this out of here. And the reason we want to be able to call a function from our widget when they pull to refresh, so we need one in the block to reference. And so we'll just do refresh departures up here, and we will await it. So that reactivates our listener when the station is changed. It will go and refresh the departures. We're not passing in a station or getting a station, but we have our station in our stream up here. So we can do our underscore station dot value in place of that. All right, now if we save that, we've got a refresh departures, which is an async. We are calling it just like we were up here, but we've moved it to its own function. So when we go to departures, in our build method, when we build this list view, we want to give the user the option of pulling to refresh. So let's just wrap this list view, we'll wrap it with a widget, and we will use refresh indicator widget, which does a lot of work for us, and we just need to give it the onRefresh function, which we can do through BLoC and call our refresh departures. Now we don't want to pass an instance of it, we want to pass just the function, so make sure we get those parentheses out of there. And if we do that, we should be able to pull down and see a spinner, and when it goes back out, we get different results. Let's put this on Suburban Station. Let's get a bunch of results here. Both directions. Depending on the time of day that you're doing this, depending on how busy it is in Philadelphia, downtown Philadelphia, you might get different results, or it might just stay the same. So I am about 5 minutes from a departure time, so we're just going to leave that up there, and we'll come back and refresh it in a few minutes and see if we get some changes. Let's see if we're any better at 30th Street, actually. Even better. We're 1 minute from a departure, or 1 minute. Well, there it went. It's gone now. So now the Norristown is our next one in 3 minutes, and it's on time. So we'll just leave that up there. Now, in addition to pull to refresh, ideally this would refresh itself. And to do that, we can set up RxStart, and we can use the timer feature of RxStart to make this automatically refresh itself. And there's a few different ways you could go about this, but the way I wanted to go about it was to just put a timer in the refresh function. So in SEPTA BLoC, this is our refresh departure. Every time it gets refreshed, I would like us also to start a 60-second timer and then run that refresh departures over again after 60 seconds. All right, so this is fine here. So we're gonna do our refresh, but then we're gonna set a timer to run again. And we can do that with a TimerStream. And this is gonna take, it basically takes a value in the first, why am I coming up? So it basically takes a value in the first parameter, and then it takes the duration in the second. And the value, you can actually pass it the function. So we could pass it refresh departures, but because refresh departures is an async, and we want to be able to await it, we don't actually want to pass that there. So you can really pass in anything. You could pass a string or whatever you want to pass to your function when the timer is up. And so I'm just going to put in a timestamp that we can then print to the console. But it really doesn't matter what you put there. It's all in what you want to get out. And this is more important. This is the duration, and this is how long you want to wait. And so I'm going to wait 60 seconds, also known as 1 minute. And then we can listen to that. And when that timer is up, we're going to get the value that we put here. So I'm just going to call that timestamp. We'll do an async because we do want to await inside this function. And I'm going to print refreshing at timestamp. And then I'm going to call the whole function over again, refresh departures, and that will just start the whole thing over again. It'll go to the top, it will run, it will start the timer again, and it will refresh in 60 seconds. So I'm going to save that. I'm actually going to comment it for a second, just because it should be about time when I can pull this down, and Norristown should be close to leaving. There we go. So Norristown has left, so that refresh is working great. So I am going to uncomment this. So now it will set the timer for 60 seconds. I am going to restart the state. And I am going to pull up a terminal. And in our debug console, we should see it print when it refreshes. So I'm going to pause it and let 60 seconds go by and show you the result of that debug console. All right, there it went at 28 seconds after the, or actually 10 seconds after the minute hand. It refreshed, a train disappeared. That seems to be working just fine. So now we have the ability to refresh it manually if we want to pull the swipe, or also we could just stare at our phone, and every 1 minute it's going to update. These values are going to change. Trains are going to move off the board, just like it would if you were standing there at the station. Excellent. All right, now I want to go get that station list. So we have an actual station list, and that train just disappeared, and it refreshed itself, if you didn't notice that. So we want to go get that station list. So we're going to go to a website I call Google, and I'm just going to look for SEPTA API. And this is where we got the original endpoint for our HTTP call. And then we have, right, so this is where we got the call, and then up here is this CSV file. I'm just going to right click and copy the address for that file, and I'm going to get it in the SEPTA service. So we go to services, and our SEPTA service has the service that goes to the SEPTA.org website and gets the trains. And so we want to add another function that will get us stations. So we come down here, we get stations, and we want that to be an async. And what we want to do is we want to create a request object. So we're going to use the HTTP client library in Dart to go to that CSV file to get the contents, and then we're going to split each line, which will be a line that has a station ID and a station name, and then we're just going to pull out the station names because that's all we want. We're passing that to our API endpoint. So request, and we will await this HTTP client, which I'll need to import. So we want to get a URL, and we actually need to get a URI. So we're going to use URI. We'll import that, .parse, and in there is where we put the CSV. That was wrong. Let me see. I should have copied link address. There we go. We can throw a semicolon in here. I feel like I have one too many parentheses. Parse. Yeah, I do. All right, and then we will get a response if we await request.close. Response. Nope. Response. There we go. So that will get us the contents of the file. We need to split it by the line break. So I'm going to wait, and we're going to do response.transform. And this is going to allow us to transform that stream that we just got, which is our response object. We're going to do convert.utf8 decoder. And convert is the prefix that we have put on Dart convert. So everywhere you see convert, we are just calling in Dart convert. We did that shorthand up here for the HTTP call, and now we're going to continue to use it down here in this next function. So we need open parentheses, close parentheses, another close parentheses, and then we want to listen to that. And that's going to get us the contents of the file. So that's what we have so far. Another parentheses right there. Okay. So this is where we can use convert line splitter, and this is a nice little utility in Dart. We will set that up. We'll call it LS, and it's going to be a new line splitter, and this is a nice little class that splits the lines and figures out, different systems have different line breaks. You don't have to worry about it. You call line splitter. It figures out which system you're on and which line break should be used and breaks that down into a list. So we will get a list of strings back when we call that line splitter. We'll call them lines, and we will just do ls.convert file contents. So we pass the file contents to the line splitter we created up here, and it gives us a list of strings that we're going to call lines, and I'm just going to put that semicolon there so it's happy. Okay, so I'm going to do this in somewhat of an old-fashioned way. I'm actually going to create an output variable equals list. So we'll just create an empty string. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to iterate through each line. So for each, get myself a line object. And then I'm going to add to that output list the line, but not the whole line, because remember we'll have a station ID, comma, station name. So I want to split that by a comma, and then just take the second element, so just the name. And then I'm going to return an output. So if you want to keep this really succinct, and by all means go for it, you do a map here, and then you can return on this. I just find there's some steps going on here, and I find this is a better representation of all that is taking place. Now, this is a stream right here. This is what we get when we start to transform this as a stream. A future would be a lot more useful to us, because we only want to get this value. We want to go out to SEPTA. We want to get this CSV, and then we're just done at that point. I mean, the stations aren't going to be changing on the fly. We don't need a stream. So I'm going to just mark it as future. And then my return type can be future of list of string, 2 closings right there, and that is our function. So then if we skip back to our SEPTA block, so we go to our blocks folder, our SEPTA block, we can create a station stream that we can then listen to with our UI. So if we come up here and we do final underscore stations equals a behavior subject, which will be of type list of string. We come down here to our getters and we add a stream of type list of string, get stations, and that's our stations.stream. We'll give ourselves a setter, so we will pass it a list of string. And so that's get change stations. And that allows us to dump that into the sync of the stations. Stations.sync.add. We need a dispose method for any stream that we set up, so stations.close. Takes care of that. Now down here below our refresh departures, let's create a method of, it'll be a type of future void. And we will load our stations. So this is the function we can call from the UI to get back, or this is actually the function we will call right here in the block to get this, get the stream loaded up. So we will call our change stations, which adds to our sync, and into that we will dump the result of waiting our SEPTA service dot get stations. And lastly, we will put that in the constructor. So we've got load settings, and we will also load stations. All right, so when the block is created, it calls down here, it goes to the service talks to SEPTA, gets a list of those stations, and those are dumped into the sync for the station stream, and now we can access that from the UI. So last step, gonna go to settings. And we have departures here. We have our station here. So we have this hard-coded with these 4 stations, and we now have the means to completely replace that. And so let's come here to we need to wrap it with the stream builder, and let's do it right around this row where the stations are. So we'll wrap this row here, and we will wrap with the stream builder. That stream builder is going to be of type string. And the stream that we want is stations. And our snapshot, so we have a snapshot up here, and we need to distinguish it from the one above it. So let's call it snapshot stations. And if that snapshot is, there's nothing in it. So if not, snapshot stations dot has data. So if there's no data, let's just return a row with no children in it. And this should actually be a list of strings. That's why we've got that going on. So fix that. All right, so then down here in our items, let's get rid of all the bracket here. So start before map. So right before the dot and map. Take everything out up before these up to the semicolon and items, and now we can pass that snapshot stations dot data, and then that will take that list of strings. It will execute the logic that we had before that turns that into a drop down, and we need to restart our state so that we get all that stuff. It's only going to happen on fire up. But when we go to change, we default to suburban, but now we can pick any line in the system. All right, so there we go. Now this, there's certainly some things we could work on here. I'm going to put a light wrap on this, which means I'm probably not going to put out another episode for a while. I may revisit it. It may prove a nice starting point for other projects, but I'm going to more or less consider this series wrapped up. There's certainly some improvements that could be made. It would be nice to actually be able to type something in. On a real device, it swipes up and down pretty quick, but it might be nice to be able to narrow this when the user starts typing a letter, that it narrows down. You will notice that when you refresh, when you swipe to refresh, when you are in this block here, every time you swipe to refresh, you are restarting a 60-second timer, which is unaware of any existing timers. So every time you swipe to refresh, you're starting the clock over again, which will actually run in addition to the original 60-second clock. So if somebody's sitting there swiping down, swiping down, swiping down, swiping down, they're going to set it so that there's quite a few auto refreshes every 60 seconds. If we were to take this app further, we would definitely want to kind of nip that in the bud. Some of you felt that maybe it would be better to go out and back to the API when these departures are changed. That's really kind of a decision of the developer. We want to balance the amount of data we bring down with the amount of network that we need. In this app, I made the decision we're only going to go get information when we change the station, and we're going to get plenty of information, like 20 records. It seems pretty small. There's only 4 fields, and it's an acceptable amount of data to pull down. But if you disagree and you want to narrow that, you could certainly hook the API up to this departure field as well. So there's some improvements if you want to take this further, and if you do, please let me know how it works out for you. I hope that you found this helpful. This was requested that we take Provider and BLoC and put it into more of a context of a real app and go beyond the hello world type of situation. And so that's why we put this together. So thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, and please continue to watch. Thanks so much.